Hi and welcome to Cars and Coffee Stories. We are in Los Angeles at AutoConduct and I'm next to Jeff. Nice to meet you.
A pleasure. Well, this is a Lamborghini Miura. The first ones that were built were called P400s. 1965 is when they were when they came out, and they were built from 65 through 72. And there's three basic versions: the P400, the Miura S, and then the Miura SV was the final version. This is a Miura S, a very early one.
The designer was Marcello Gandini, one of my favorite designers. Let's talk about design. What's the favorite part in terms of aesthetic? What's your favorite part on the car?
The eyelashes.
The eyelashes.
I have a daughter who, when I would take the cars to show, she's very into her looks and makeup and everything. So her job, to get her involved with the car, I'd always let her do the eyelashes, and she would get a little Q-tip and come out here and do that.
Nice.
But, yeah, the functional side of the design is what really gets me, because when you see the car and you don't know them that well, you see things like this. And people go, well, why is this cut out like that? Well, this is the gas filler. So the whole thing opens up and that's the gas filler.
Okay.
So most people have no idea, but it's functional, but it's still very beautiful. You have these beautiful headrests just floating in the glass. It's like, how did Lamborghini do that? And it's like so crude how they did it. Well, there's a channel back here, and this metal just goes into it, and so you just pop it out. But it's functional. What's funny is I've had this car to show parked next to an original Ford GT40. So when you see what a landmark design this was, you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. But the GT40 was before this, and when you park a GT40 next to this, they're almost twins. The dimensions, everything is almost the same. So I think in design there's a lot of derivative stuff that goes on where, because the Ford was a race car, and but this was for the street, and still it was a 12-cylinder, it wasn't an 8, so it still had a lot of innovative design. And the Americans could never make it this sexy, where they have vents going in like this, or even the simple door handle, how beautiful that is. Beautiful. So it takes the Italians to do something like this.
How does it feel to drive? Is it? I mean, most people would think they have it's a front engine.
Right. But what you really have to get at is it was more than that. It was Lamborghini decided they built a engine block and transmission that were all one casting. So there's no separate transmission. The oil that goes through the transmission and the engine, it's all the same oil. So they took a 12-cylinder and then put it sideways in the middle of a car. It was like craziness. It was like somebody forgot how a car was made and they started from scratch and said, no, this is what we're going to do.
So you're leading literally at the engine, right?
When you look back here, I'll show you quick.
Yeah.
When you see that this, put your finger in there and you can't even fit your finger through.
Oh, no, it's almost touching,
close.
right?
It's almost touching. It's that close. So when you're in the car and your head is right back by those carburetors and the exhaust system goes right down there, you will notice that there's no radio in the car. You don't need it. You have all that beautiful music right behind you, and the gears from the transmission, everything, the exhaust note. It makes the most beautiful music you'll ever hear.
What's the best experience you had with this car?
Every time I take it out, something amazing happens, but I was invited to show it at a private party at the Super Bowl in New Orleans. So having it shipped there, and then I was with my son, being able to do that experience. I've met some of the best experience. 2016, I was invited to show at Pebble Beach, and they had a special class for the Miura. It was the 50th anniversary, and in the class was the prototype SV that Lamborghini had just restored for an owner here in LA. So now the factory does their own restorations. At that show, Lamborghini sponsored the class and they supplied the judges. I took first place over the car that they restored. They chose this unrestored original. So this is unrestored original. This is the original paint, upholstery. I even have the original tires on it. They chose that car over the car that they had restored. And then I won a special award for the best preservation, post-war preservation car at Pebble Beach that year. So that was the #1 experience. Can't beat that. I've been to Monterey. I go to Monterey almost every year with this car, and I love driving it around because people go nuts. They never see one of these on the road. And to me, it's funny when I'm in a gas station, filling up, and a carload of Italians stop, and they jump out and they go, "We've never seen one of these in person. Can we look at your car?" So to me, that's the fun part, posing it and showing people that they can be driven, that they are fun, that they are functional, that you can drive them. So, that's it.
How often you drive it?
As often as I can, as often as I get an excuse to drive it. It's a little hairy out on the roads and everything, but to own something like this, it's one thing to own it, but to drive it, it's like insane. It's so much fun. So it's not, I park it in my office at home. Seriously, I have my office and doors going into my office so I can park it right in there. Cool. It wouldn't be half the experience it is if you don't drive the car. That's the fun part.
What's your favorite angle?
I love the angle from the back.
Yeah.
Because I love, it's this right here. I just love the little flip up tail and everything. It's so hard to gauge the scale on it because I stand here looking at it and it's wide and everything, and it doesn't look like a tiny car to me, but then somebody else give me a picture of myself standing next to the car. I'm like, damn, either I'm really big or that's really a tiny car. And then when you realize it's standing next to it, it's waist high. Yeah. So when you're driving in traffic, even like that Porsche over there, you're looking at their door. Well, even on the Ford GT, Camilo, I asked him about the car because I was asking him all kinds of questions about the design, and he said one thing that he was adamant about. To me, the worst part of the car is the doors, where the doors cut into the roof, because you go to get out, you have to open the door all the way, and if you don't, you hit your head on it, and I've bruised my head a couple times on that. And he goes, you know what, to me that was a critical part of the design, and I told Ford that they had to leave that in there. They wanted to make the doors regular doors without the cutoffs, have a target top. He goes, no, I told them it has to stay like this. Well, what's crazy is like a new Ford GT, like those are like, I think 3/4 of the real car, so they're actually bigger than the original Ford GT. I have a GT, a newer one, and when you park it next to this, it looks so big and, but yeah, it looks ungainly almost. But if you see it by itself, it's a gorgeous car. At the Lamborghini Nationals, I won Best of Show, and they have an award given out called the Bull Award. After the show, Valentino Balboni was walking around, and somebody asked, could you sign my trophy? If you're familiar with Shelby's and that, Carroll Shelby would sign people's cars. So I go, screw the trophy. I go, hey, Valentino, will you sign my car? And he goes, you want me to sign the car? And I go, yes, please. So I had my marker, and I lifted, I go, sign it right here. And he signed it Bellissimo. Valentino.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Valentino Balboni. It's so Bellissimo Valentino.
That's so cool.
So then now, anytime he's at a show,
so cool.
I started that people have him sign their cars now. When I see some of the, like at Pebble Beach where they have all this, one-offs, the show cars and everything, there's some of them that are just stunning. But, like the whole story behind this was, it was never meant to be produced. This was something that the employees, who were all in their 20s at the time, Bob Wallace, even Gandini, and that, these guys were late 20s, so relatively young guys, and they wanted to go racing. And they took the basic chassis, the 12-cylinder engine, to Fioruccio and said, can we take this and go racing with it? And he said, I told you we will never have a race car. We're only GT cars, street cars. And then he said, but why don't we turn this into a street car? Well, can you imagine some company doing that today? You know, some guys sitting, you know, some guys going, hey, maybe we can go racing, and the factory goes, oh no, let's build a street car out of that. So the fact that they were able to get away with that, and Fioruccio stood behind it, and they came out with this, that to me is pretty amazing. It's like driving a race car, basically, because you're sitting on the ground, and it's very, very responsive. I have a very good friend that has a 427 Cobra, and he's admired these since he was a kid. He said he remembers seeing one when he was a small kid, and just like riding his bike to where it was parked to go look at it. And he had never driven in one, so when I went to a show recently, Cars and Coffee out in Malibu, I took him with me. I said, hey, you want to go with me for a ride? He goes, sure. And when we came back, he goes, you know what, I got to tell you something. Have you ever heard that saying, don't meet your heroes? And I go, yeah. And he goes, this car far exceeds anything that he goes, this must have been crazy back in 1966 or 67 driving one of these. You had to be a rock star, you know, driving one of these around. Pretty crazy.
All right, last question. What do you think of today's cars, especially Lamborghinis?
My mother told me at one point, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, it's completely different.
It's a completely different car. And the thing I love about this car is that when you're driving it, you have to be very aware, and it feels like you're part of it, that you're controlling it, the revs of the engine and everything. And I love cars today. The performance is insane, but it's a different connection. It's totally different. And when you see, 800 horsepower cars that anybody can walk into a dealership, and you see some rich kid driving around in one, and they don't know how to drive, or it's different, They're just, it's so different, it's hard to compare, but I'm old school, I like stuff like this better. I think personally that this design, now I can't even imagine what this looked like in 1965. They say it looked like a spaceship had landed. I think this design has aged so well, it looks just as good now as it did then. I question right now whether an Aventador, something today, is going to look as good 50 years from now. There's so many like gimmicky little design cues and everything.
Jeff, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.